The winter of 1879 came to the Montana Territory like a sentence handed down by something that had no interest in appeals. It came early, the first hard snow falling in October, which the old-timers said was a bad sign, and which the calendar confirmed was unusual. And it came heavy, the kind of heavy that settles into the landscape and changes it fundamentally, turning familiar ground into something that requires relearning. The passes closed early. The roads between homesteads became suggestions rather than facts. The world contracted, as it always does in Montana winters, to the size of what you could see from your window and reach before the cold became dangerous. In the small valley 12 miles east of the town of Harlan, where a creek called Bitter Run wound through a stand of cottonwoods that were now bare and ice-crusted, there was a homestead. It was not a large homestead. A main house of timber and chinked log, solid but modest, with 2 windows facing south and a porch that needed new boards on the left side, and had needed them for 2 years. A barn that was better maintained than the house because the animals in it were the economic foundation of everything and therefore received the attention that the house sometimes didn't. A root cellar dug into the hillside behind. A woodpile along the east wall of the house that was, as of this particular November evening, perhaps 2/3 of what it should have been for a Montana winter. The woman who lived there was named Ruth Callan. She was 54 years old, though she moved like someone who had not informed her body of this number, and therefore her body had no particular opinion about it. She was lean and strong in the way of people who have spent 30 years doing physical work without much interruption. Gray hair, worn up in the practical way of someone who thinks about hair approximately once a day and for no longer than it takes to pin it. A face that had lines in it, not the lines of unhappiness, but the lines of weather and attention, and the particular expressiveness of a face that has spent decades feeling things fully, without apology. She had been a widow for 4 years. Her husband, James Callan, had died in the winter of 1875. A fever that came on fast and moved faster, the kind that the doctor in Harlan said he had seen before, and that he said with the look of a man who had seen it before, and had not been able to do anything about it on any of those occasions. James had been 51 years old, and had been a good man in the way that Ruth thought about goodness, not as the absence of fault, because James had faults enough, but as a fundamental orientation toward doing right, that persisted even when it was inconvenient. She missed him every day. Not in the acute way of the first year. That particular pain had softened, as people told her it would, which she had not believed them about at the time and had been surprised to find was true. But in the way of a physical absence that you keep reaching for out of habit, and that is not there. The other side of the bed, the sound of his boots on the porch. The particular way he had of sitting at the table in the evenings, reading by lamplight, present and quiet and entirely himself. 4 years alone. She had managed. She was good at managing. Better, it turned out, than she had known she was, because James had always been the one who managed, and she had always been the one who made things work. And it turned out that making things work was the larger part of the job. Her son Thomas was in Denver. He wrote every month, good letters, detailed and affectionate, full of news about his work at the bank and his wife Clara and their 2 children whom Ruth had met once and who were, in the photographs Thomas sent, growing at the alarming speed that children grow when you are not watching them daily. Thomas had asked her, in every letter for 3 years, to come to Denver, to sell the homestead, to live with them or near them. Ruth had not done this. She was not sure she could explain to Thomas's satisfaction why not. The homestead was not easy. The winters were hard. The work was relentless. She was 54 years old, and her left knee hurt in the cold, and the woodpile was 2/3 of what it should be. But the homestead was where she and James had built something, where her hands knew every board and every fence post and every stubborn patch of ground. where the creek sound came through the window in spring and the cottonwoods went gold in October before the snow came. Where James was buried under the big cottonwood at the east edge of the property, and where Ruth went every morning with coffee she didn't always drink, but always brought. This was home. She was staying. The storm that arrived on the evening of November 14th was not unusual for Montana in November, which is to say it was extraordinary by any other standard. It came from the northwest with the sudden decision of weather that has been building for days and has finally made up its mind. By 4 in the afternoon, the sky was the color of iron. By 5, the wind was moving the snow horizontally. By 6, the world outside Ruth's south-facing windows had become a white nothing that contained no information about distance or direction. Ruth had her fire built up before the worst of it hit. She had her animals in the barn, 3 horses, 11 cattle, the chickens in their enclosed pen attached to the barn's east wall. She had soup on the stove, a good thick one, venison and root vegetables and barley, the kind of soup that a Montana winter requires rather than merely suggests. She had her lamp trimmed and lit, and she had her mending on the table, and she had, all things considered, the particular settled feeling of someone who is prepared for a difficult thing and is ready for it. She was not prepared for the knock on the door. It came at 7:30, a sound that she first took for the wind, which was making all manner of sounds against the house, and then identified as something more deliberate. She set down her mending. She went to the door. She opened it. The man on her porch was covered in snow. Not dusted, covered, the way a thing gets covered when it has been in a blizzard for a long time without shelter. His dark hair was matted with ice. His coat, a heavy wool thing that had been adequate for something but was not adequate for this, was soaked through. He was tall and broad-shadowed, and he was holding onto the porch post with both hands in the way of a man who has been moving on will alone for the last hour and is now, having found something solid to hold, unsure whether the will is going to continue. He looked at her. His eyes were dark, very dark, set in a face that was simultaneously young and old in the way of someone who has seen a great deal in a short time. He had a beard of several days, crusted with ice at the edges. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, visible through the ice and the snow, that had bled and dried and bled again. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, with the careful enunciation of a man using his last reserve of functioning, "I saw your light." Ruth looked at him for approximately 2 seconds. Then she stepped back and held the door open. "Come in," she said. He came in. He sat in the chair she directed him to, the one nearest the stove, and dripped steadily onto her floor, and she got his coat off him, which took a while because his hands were not working well. And she hung it by the fire and got blankets from the chest and put them around him and went back to the stove. She ladled soup into a bowl. She brought it to the table and sat across from him and held it out with a spoon. He looked at the bowl, then at her. There was something in his expression that was hard to read. Not gratitude exactly, because gratitude is a social response, and he was somewhere below the level where social responses live. Something more fundamental. The look of a creature that has been cold for a very long time and has just encountered warmth and is still in the process of believing it. "Can you hold it?" she said. He reached out and took the bowl. His hands were shaking badly. She kept her hands under the bowl until she was sure he had it, then let go slowly. He ate. She sat across from him and watched and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say, and she had learned long ago that silence is often the most practical thing available. He ate the whole bowl. She got him another. He ate that one more slowly, which she took as a good sign. The second bowl meant the body was beginning to think about something other than survival. When it was done, he sat with the empty bowl in his hands and looked at the table. "Thank you," he said. "There's bread," she said. "There's bread," she said again, in the tone of someone who is not offering, but informing. She cut him 2 thick slices and put them on the table with butter. He ate those too. His name, he told her, was Daniel Holt. He was 32 years old, though he looked older tonight, in the way that extreme cold and exhaustion add years that sleep and warmth will later subtract. He had been riding from Harlan toward the Pemberton Ranch, 15 miles to the east, where he had work waiting. He had misjudged the storm, had thought he could make the Pemberton place before it closed in, which was the kind of miscalculation that the Montana winter was entirely indifferent to. His horse had gone lame 5 miles back. He had left the horse in a stand of timber, tied with what shelter the trees provided, and walked. "The horse," Ruth said. "I know," he said. "I couldn't bring her in this." "We'll go in the morning," Ruth said. "The storm should break by dawn." "Where exactly?" He described the timber stand. She knew it, a stand of cottonwood and pine about 2 miles northeast, the last cover before the open ground that ran to the Pemberton fence line. "She's good-natured," he said, with the particular tone of a man talking about an animal he cares about. "She won't have panicked." "We'll get her," Ruth said. She said it with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone who has decided a thing and sees no reason to discuss it further. Daniel Holt looked at her. "You don't know me," he said. "No," she said, "I don't." "You let me in anyway." Ruth looked at the window where the storm was pressing its white face against the glass. "It was 7:30 at night in a blizzard," she said. "What else was I going to do?" He was quiet for a moment. "Some people would have done something else," he said. "Some people," Ruth said, "are going to answer for that themselves. I'd rather answer for what I did." She gave him James's old room. She did this without particular ceremony, changed the sheets, which she kept clean out of habit even for a room no one used, put a candle on the table, showed him where the wash basin was. He looked at the room with the expression of someone who has been given more than they expected and is not quite sure how to hold it. "This was your husband's," he said. He wasn't asking. There was something in the room that told him. The particular quality of a space that was personal once and is now preserved. "It was," she said. "He passed 4 years ago." "I'm sorry." "Thank you," she said, the same way she always said it. Then, "Sleep. We'll go for the horse at first light." She went to her own room and lay down and listened to the storm work itself out against the house. And sometime before midnight, the wind dropped and the quality of the silence changed in the way that tells you the worst is over. She was up at 5. He was already up. She found him in the kitchen, her kitchen, which he had entered carefully, with the consideration of someone in another person's space, with the fire stoked and the coffee on. He had found the coffee on the shelf and the pot on the hook, and he had made it with the efficiency of someone accustomed to functioning in unfamiliar kitchens in early mornings, which told her something about the kind of life he'd had. He looked up when she came in. "I hope that was all right," he said, meaning the coffee. "It's more than all right," she said. She got 2 cups. She poured. They sat at the table in the pre-dawn quiet and drank and looked at the window where the storm had become the still gray of first light on new snow. "How deep do you think?" he said. 2 feet on the flat," she said. "More in the drifts. We'll take the big horse. He's got the legs for it." "You don't have to come," he said. "I know the timber stand," she said. "You described it, but you were half frozen when you did it. I know exactly where it is." She looked at him. "Beside, it's my horse we're taking and my land we're crossing. I'd say I do have to come." He looked at her for a moment, with the expression he'd had several times the previous night, the one she couldn't entirely place, that had something of appraisal in it, and something of something else she hadn't named yet. "All right," he said. They went out into the white morning. The mare was exactly where he'd said, in the cottonwood stand, tied to the largest tree, standing in snow up to her knees with the patient, slightly aggrieved expression of a horse that has spent an uncomfortable night and would like it acknowledged. She was uninjured. The lameness had been a stone bruise, serious enough to stop travel in that weather, but not permanently damaging. Ruth examined the hoof with the practiced efficiency of a woman who has been the primary horse care on a homestead for 4 years and knew what she was looking at. "She'll be fine," she said. "A few days' rest." Daniel was standing in the snow, stroking the mare's neck with the particular relief of a person reunited with something they'd been genuinely worried about. "She's got a good constitution," he said. "She does," Ruth agreed. "What's her name?" "June," he said. Ruth looked at the mare, who had turned her head and was looking at Daniel with the warm attention of an animal that has decided its person is satisfactory. "That's a good name," Ruth said. They brought June back through the snow, Ruth leading the big horse and Daniel walking beside June. And by the time they reached the homestead, the morning had gone from gray to white to the particular sharp blue of a Montana day after new snow. The sky so clear it seemed like something that had been cleaned. He stayed 3 days. This was not entirely planned. June needed rest. The roads were impassable for another day, and Ruth's woodpile, which she had been managing but which had been concerning her, needed attention. Daniel noticed the woodpile on the first morning. He didn't say anything about it. He simply, after June was settled in the barn and breakfast was finished, went out with Ruth's axe and worked through the afternoon with the steady, unhurried efficiency of a man doing a thing that needs doing. By evening, the woodpile was right. Ruth stood and looked at it. "You didn't have to do that," she said. It was the thing she said, apparently, the thing people said when someone had done something for them that they were not obligated to do. Daniel looked at her with the faint expression that might, in a different man, have been a smile. "I saw your light," he said. She understood that he was returning her own logic to her, that she had let him in because it was what the situation required, and he had split her wood because it was what the situation required, and that these were the same kind of act. She almost smiled. "Supper's at 6, she said, and went inside. Those 3 days had a quality that Ruth did not try to analyze while they were happening, because she was not a woman who analyzed things while they were happening. She analyzed them afterward, in the evenings, in the particular quiet of a house that was back to being a single person's house, where there was space for thought. They worked. That was mostly what happened. Ruth had her animals and her household and the accumulated small tasks of a homestead after a major snow. Daniel worked alongside her, not as a guest who was helping, but as someone who assessed what needed doing and did it, which was a different thing and one she noticed. They talked, in the intervals between work, with the gradual ease of people who are building something conversational from the ground up and who are in no particular hurry. He was from Missouri originally, a farm boy who had come west at 19 for reasons he summarized as wanting to see what was out there, which Ruth understood as a young person's version of something that she had a more precise name for at 54, which was the need to find out who you are when the context of your origin is removed. He had worked cattle drives, mining camps, ranch work in Wyoming and Idaho. He had been on his way to the Pemberton place for a winter's work. He asked her about James, not intrusively, in the way of someone who has noticed the presence of a life in a house and is genuinely curious about it. She told him, the good parts and the honest parts, which were different categories that sometimes overlapped. He listened the way that certain people listen, which is to say, completely, which is rarer than it should be. He asked about Thomas, whom he had deduced from the photograph on the mantelpiece. She told him about Denver and the letters and the gentle, sustained pressure to leave. "Why don't you?" he asked, directly, without judgment. "Because this is home," she said, also directly. "Because James is buried here." Because this ground knows my hands, and I know it. Because in Denver, I would be Thomas's mother, and I love Thomas deeply, but I am also Ruth Callan, and Ruth Callan lives here." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That's a good answer," he said. "It's the true one," she said. On the morning of the fourth day, the road to Pemberton's was passable. Daniel saddled June at first light. June's hoof had healed cleanly, as Ruth had said it would. He tied his bedroll and his saddlebag and came to the house to say goodbye. Ruth was at the door. "I don't know how to," he started. "Then don't try," she said, not unkindly. "You split my wood. We're even." He looked at her for a moment. "I'd like to come back," he said, "when the Pemberton work is done. In the spring, maybe. Not to impose, He stopped. "You know where I am," she said. He nodded. Mounted June, rode north. Ruth watched him until the white road bent around the cottonwood stand, and she couldn't see him anymore. Then she went inside and poured herself coffee and sat at the table in the morning quiet. She did not think too much about it. She was 54 years old, and she had learned not to think too much about things she could not control, which was most things. But she sat at the table a little longer than she usually did before she started the day. Spring in Montana comes the way good things often come after hard things, gradually, then suddenly, in a way that catches you off guard, even when you've been waiting for it. The creek came back first, the ice going out of Bitter Run in late March with the sound of something releasing that had been held too long. Then the ground, which had been iron for 5 months, softened into mud that sucked at boots and was deeply, thoroughly welcome for all that. Then the grass, green so bright it almost hurt after the long white. Then the cottonwoods, leafing out in their particular yellow-green that Ruth had been seeing for 30 years and that still, every year, was a kind of miracle. Ruth worked through the spring with the accumulated energy of someone who has spent months conserving. The kitchen garden, the fencing that needed attention after the winter, the barn roof that had developed a situation in the northwest corner that she addressed herself because the alternative was waiting for Thomas to arrange someone from Harlan, and Thomas's arrangements, lovingly made, took longer than her own. She thought about Daniel Holt. Not constantly. She was too busy for constant and too practical. But in the way that a person thinks about a thing that has been set aside but not dismissed. In the mornings, sometimes, when she brought coffee to James's grave and talked about the day. She mentioned Daniel once, told James about the storm and the knock on the door and the 3 days of work and the woodpile. She told it matter-of-factly, the way she told James everything, and she did not elaborate on the parts that were harder to put into plain language. James, she thought, would have liked Daniel Holt. Would have appreciated the directness, the willingness to work, the quality of his attention. James had always respected people who listened well, because James had been a good listener himself and knew how uncommon it was. She did not let herself think beyond that. She was not the kind of woman who let herself think very far beyond what was in front of her, which was a discipline she had developed over the years and which served her well, and which, occasionally, on certain evenings in early spring when the light was doing what it does in the valley, that long, amber warmth that seems to come from inside the grass itself, she recognized as also being a protection against something she hadn't decided to want. March became April. April became May. She received a letter from Thomas in April that contained, along with the news of Denver and the children and Clara's new involvement with the church social committee, a passage that Ruth read twice and then sat down and looked at the window for a while before responding. Thomas had heard, through what network of correspondence she couldn't determine, that a widow woman had been living alone on the Callan homestead through the winter and had taken in a stranger during the November blizzard. The stranger, Thomas had heard, had worked for her for several days. Thomas was glad she had not been harmed. Thomas expressed concern about her safety and judgment, and reiterated his standing invitation to Denver, and added, this time, that Clara had a perfectly good room on the second floor. Ruth wrote back a letter that addressed Thomas's concerns with the measured patience of a woman who loves her son very much, and is also entirely capable of managing her own decisions. She said she was well. She said the stranger had been a decent man in difficult circumstances, and she would make the same decision again. She said the homestead was in good order, and her knee was better than it had been in February, and the garden was already showing promise. She said she would visit Denver in the summer, which was something she had been saying for 2 years without doing, but which she found herself meaning this time. She sent the letter. Then she went out to the barn and did the afternoon feeding and told the horses about Thomas, which she did sometimes, because horses are good listeners, and the stakes of being judged are refreshingly low. May became June. She did not hear from Daniel Holt. She had not expected to hear from him. He had said in the spring, maybe, and maybe is a word with wide margins. She did not know the Pemberton Ranch well enough to know how long a winter's work lasted, or whether the spring had been good or bad for cattle, or any of the dozen circumstances that can delay a maybe indefinitely. She did not let herself be disappointed by this. Or rather, she noticed the thing that was not quite disappointment, the small adjustment that happens in a body when something it had been quietly anticipating does not arrive, and she acknowledged it honestly, and then set it aside, because it was not productive, and she had a homestead to run. She planted her garden. She repaired the porch boards, the left side that had needed it for 2 years, which she did herself on a dry afternoon in June, with boards she'd had the Harlan lumberyard deliver in April. She did a competent job of it, better than she'd expected, and she stood on the finished porch and pressed her weight on each board deliberately, testing her work, and found it sound. She went to James's grave under the cottonwood and told him about the porch. She did not mention Daniel Holt. Some things, she was finding, were harder to explain to James than she had expected. Not because James wouldn't have understood. James, she was fairly certain, would have understood everything, would have been generous and clear-eyed, and perhaps, knowing James, would have been glad. But because she didn't yet understand it herself, and she was a woman who didn't talk about things she didn't understand. June became July. She visited Denver. She saw Thomas and Clara and the grandchildren who were alarming in their growth and beautiful in their aliveness. She stayed 2 weeks. She slept in the second-floor room. She went to Thomas's bank and met his colleagues and had dinner at the home of Clara's parents, who were pleasant people of a type she recognized, solid, decent, a little bit comfortable in the way of people who have not been asked to be anything else. She liked Denver less than she expected to, and missed the homestead more than was convenient. She came home in August. The cottonwoods were deep green. The creek was low and clear, and making its summer sound. The garden had survived the 2 weeks with the help of a neighbor's daughter who had watered it in exchange for eggs. Ruth walked around the property that evening. All of it, the full perimeter, the way she did every spring and fall as a kind of accounting. The fence lines, the barn, the root cellar, the porch with its new left-side boards, James's grave under the big cottonwood, the grass grown green over it, the stone she had placed herself with his name and the years of his life and the single word she had chosen: good. She sat down beside it in the late August light. "I'm all right," she told him. "I think I'm all right." The cottonwood moved its leaves in the evening air, the way it always did, its own kind of answer. September in Montana is the most beautiful month and the most dishonest one. It arrives with blue skies and golden light, and the cottonwoods turning, and the air that has lost the summer heat and gained a crispness that makes everything feel clear and possible. And it does not tell you that behind it, 6 weeks away, is another Montana winter.
Ruth had always loved September. She was on the porch on a Saturday afternoon in the third week of September, mending, which she did outside when the weather allowed, because the light was better and the day was around her rather than behind glass, when she heard hoofbeats on the road. She looked up. The road from the east, the Pemberton direction, was visible from the porch for about half a mile before it bent around the cottonwood stand. She looked for a while without particular interpretation. The rider came around the bend. She recognized the horse first, a bay mare with a particular way of moving, not quite like other horses, a slight flourish in the front step, as if June found the ground interesting in a way that other horses didn't. Then she recognized the man. She set down her mending. She did not stand up immediately. She sat for a moment with her hands in her lap and did the thing she did not often permit herself, which was to feel something fully before deciding what to do about it. What she felt was complicated. There was relief, which surprised her by being as large as it was. There was something warm that she was going to need to think about carefully. And there was the particular feeling of a person who has been not quite waiting for something for months and is now confronted with the fact that they were, in fact, waiting. She stood up. Daniel Holt came down the road and stopped at the fence gate. He looked older than November. Not worse, just more settled, the way a face settles when the person wearing it has worked through something. He had shaved. He was wearing a better coat. He looked at her from the gate. "I said spring," he said. "It got to be fall." "I noticed," she said. "The Pemberton work ran long," he said. "Then there was a thing in Billings that needed handling. Then..." He stopped. "I'm not explaining this well." "You don't need to explain it," she said. "I want to," he said. "I want to explain it correctly." She waited. "I've been trying to figure out," he said slowly, "whether what I wanted to come back for was something real or something I had made up in my head during a difficult 3 days in November." He looked at her directly, the way he always looked at things. "I didn't want to come back and find out it was something I'd made up." Ruth held his gaze. "And?" she said. "And I'm here," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened the gate. "Coffee's on," she said. He stayed. Not in the way of the 3 days in November, not as a guest, not temporarily. He stayed in the way of someone who had made a decision and was prepared to make it visible. He worked the homestead. He was good at it. Better than just good, with the range of skills that a man accumulates over years of different kinds of work, and the particular quality of someone who works best when the work is his own rather than hired. He fixed things that Ruth had been managing around for years. He extended the corral. He re-roofed the northwest corner of the barn, which had been a situation for too long. He slept in James's room. This was a fact of the situation that Ruth had thought about carefully, because she was a careful thinker, and because she understood that Marlow Creek's opinion was not entirely irrelevant, and because she was 54 years old and did not intend to be careless with the time she had remaining. She and Daniel talked about it directly, which was the only way either of them talked about things. "People will say things," she said. "People always say things," he said. "I have a son who will have opinions." "I'd like to meet your son," he said. She looked at him. "You're 22 years younger than I am," she said. "I know," he said. "That's not nothing." "No," he said. "It's not nothing." He looked at her with the directness that was simply his way. "Is it something you can't see past?" Ruth thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "It isn't." "Then I can't either," he said. Thomas came in October.
He came with the combination of filial concern and barely concealed curiosity that Ruth had predicted, and that she found in person more manageable than in anticipation. He was a good man, Thomas. James's son in the best ways, honest and decent, and with the capacity, when the situation was clear enough, to revise his opinions based on evidence. He spent 4 days. He watched Daniel work. He sat with him at meals and talked, not interrogating, because Thomas was not that kind of man, but the natural conversation of people assessing each other. He walked with Ruth along the creek the way he had when he was a boy, and he asked her questions she answered directly, and she asked him questions he answered directly. And by the end of the 4 days, something had been established that was not quite blessing, because Ruth did not require blessing, but that was recognition, which mattered to her more. On the morning he left, Thomas stood on the porch with its new left side boards, and looked at the homestead. "You fixed the porch," he said. "I did it myself," Ruth said. "Dad always meant to." "I know," she said. "It needed doing." Thomas looked at her. "Are you happy, Ma?" he said. Ruth thought about the word. She thought about whether it was the right word for what she was, for the mornings with coffee, and the work that filled the days and the evenings by the fire, and the quiet that was no longer entirely solitary, and James under the cottonwood, and the creak of the new porch boards under her feet. "I'm well," she said. "I'm very well." Thomas hugged her. He got on his horse. He rode east toward Harlan, where the stagecoach was. Ruth watched him go. Behind her, the door opened, and Daniel came out with 2 cups of coffee and handed her one and stood beside her on the porch. "He's a good man," Daniel said. "He is," Ruth said. "He's James's son." They stood on the porch in the October morning, the cottonwoods going gold, the sky that particular blue that September and October make in Montana, the creek audible and clear, and drank their coffee. The winter of 1880 came to the Valley of Bitter Run the way all Montana winters come, early and serious and entirely indifferent to human preference. It came to a homestead that was better prepared than it had been the previous year. The woodpile was right, the roof was sound, the animals were well situated in the barn. The root cellar was full of what the summer had produced, organized with the particular care of a woman who has been thinking about winter since July. On the evening of November 14th, a year to the day from the knock on the door, Ruth made soup. She made it the same way she always made it, venison and root vegetables and barley. And she set 2 bowls on the table and lit the lamp, and the fire was built up, and the storm was beginning to press its face against the south windows, and Daniel came in from the barn with snow on his coat and his hat, and stamped his boots on the porch and came inside. He looked at the table, at the 2 bowls, at the date, which he had kept as carefully as she had. He sat down. Ruth sat across from him. They looked at each other in the lamplight. "A year," he said. "A year," she said. Outside, the storm settled in for the night with the assurance of something that does not need to hurry because it has plenty of time. Inside, the lamp burned steady, and the soup steamed, and the fire spoke its low language. And Ruth Callan and Daniel Holt sat at the table in the warmth of a house that had been built for 2 and had been 1 for 4 years and was 2 again. Not the same 2, a different 2, which is the way things go when they go well. Not the restoration of what was, but the building of something new from what remained. Outside, under the big cottonwood at the east edge of the property, the snow was settling on James Callan's grave with the quiet even-handedness of weather that makes no distinctions. And somewhere in that, Ruth believed, James was satisfied. He had always wanted her to be well. She was.